Swayam Prabha. Digital India. Educated India.
Welcome to the course Nutrition for the Family. This is the fifth module in which we will be focusing on the nutrition care for the elderly. In this first lecture, we shall be studying about the changes which are associated with the aging. I am Dr. Jaspreet Kaur, presently working as Associate Professor in Government College for Girls, Ludhiana, Punjab, affiliated to Punjab University, Chandigarh. And this project is funded by DTH Swayamprabha, MHRD, New Delhi. In this lecture, we shall be studying about the aging process. We will see what causes aging, and after that we will study about the physiological changes, then physical changes and psychological changes associated with the aging process and its effect on the nutritional requirement of the elderly. So let's start. Population aging is a worldwide phenomenon, but the most rapid increase in older population, it is happening in the developing countries like India. And as per the census 2011, elderly population was more than 100 million, and it is expected to increase to 323 million by 2050. And we are expecting to have more elderly women than men in the time to come who will be over 60 years of their age. Who are elderly? Individuals above the age of 60 years, they are known as elders, and the specific age groups of, say, people who are between 65 to 75 years, we call them young old, and people who are between 75 to 85, we call them old, and people who are over 85, they are known as oldest old. And the study of health and well-being of the elderly, it is called as geriatric nutrition. What causes aging? Aging is not a disease, rather it's a biological process. If we wish to define aging, it is an irreversible biochemical change that occurs throughout an individual's life cycle and continues until the death of that person. And there are many possible causes of aging process, and out of many factors, genes, they are major determinants of the nature of aging. So what causes aging? There are many theories, and let's study one such theory. According to free radical theory, we are constantly exposed to the free radicals as they are continuously formed when we are exposed to oxygen or we are harmfully exposed to certain environmental factors. And these free radicals, they are the unstable radicals, and they will cause tissue damage and the damage to the various parts of our body. And these free radicals, along with certain other unstable compounds, we call them pro-oxidants. And these are the radicals such as superoxide, peroxide, hydroxyl radicals. They are, along with free radicals, they are the basis for inflammatory problems inside the body. Now, these inflammatory processes in the long run, they will expose the person to certain degenerative changes, which will cause degenerative diseases among the person. So these degenerative changes are the changes which cannot be reversed, and the person is exposed to, and he can get diseases such as heart diseases, various cardiovascular diseases, and diabetes and similar disorders. And along with that, we have some antioxidants. We call them endogenous antioxidants. So the examples of such compounds are uh, superoxide dismutase, then we have catalase, we have glutathione peroxidase, and all these antioxidants, they act together with certain compounds inside our body, that is glutathione and NADPH, and they help in containing these free radicals. And but what happens with the aging process and in certain diseases, these antioxidant defenses, they are lowered, and as a result, the vitamin A, vitamin C, and vitamin E reserves inside the body, they get extensively utilized. So the deficiency of these vitamins and the reserves, it occurs. We can visualize this free radical theory of human aging with the help of this figure. As we can see, this is the free radical which is not stable because it is deficient of one electron. That is why, being unstable, it starts attacking different parts of cell and body. So it will be affecting the mitochondria of the cell, and it will damage it. It will cause lipid peroxidation of the cell wall. It will damage the DNA, and it can cause mutation. So the cell growth will be affected, and along with that, there will be damage to the protein, and in turn, it will affect the functioning of the cell. With the increasing age, the cell functioning, it will slow down, and the response to various hormones and the synthesis of enzymes, it will start decreasing. Now these changes, they are associated with the decrease in number of functioning cells inside the body, functioning cells which are actively working. Since these cells, they are interdependent, so if one cell dies, the other of the same or the different organ, it will lose its ability to function, because one cell is dependent upon the another cell or another tissue, so that the whole body, it works in sync. So this will result in malfunction of the organ, and ultimately the organ system will be affected, and gradually it will affect the total body function, and this ultimately leads to the death of that person. We have just read about the process of aging and the theory of the aging. So with aging, there are certain changes which will happen, and they will affect the nutritional requirements of the elderly. So when we talk about changes, there are physiological changes. These are the changes which happen when the body functions, they are affected. And along with that, there are physical changes, there are psychological changes. The physiological changes which decline with the aging, and this changes in the body functions, they are not uniform in nature. That means it will vary among different organs of the body, and the capacity of the system, it may not decline, but the ability to respond to the challenge, say certain infections, or under certain conditions where there are one part of the body is affected. So under these challenging situations, the response to that challenge, it will be declined. And you can say the hemostasis, that is the maintenance of the internal environment of the body, that is also affected, and the capacity to maintain that homeostasis, that gets lowered. The physiological changes that occur in our body, uh, let us study what are these important physiological changes. The first change is change in the body composition. Now, the body composition, it keeps changing throughout life, but these changes, they become more important as the age advances. So there will be gradual decline in the lean body mass, which will be replaced by comparatively inactive fat mass. Studies, they have shown that between 50 to 80 years of age, the muscle mass declines to around 30%, but it could be as high as 50%. So this causes reduction in the basal metabolic rate of the body. So why this basal metabolic rate reduces? Because this is the energy which is utilized to carry out the involuntary activities of our body. And all these muscles, they are the active tissue mass. Once the person loses this muscle mass, naturally the requirement of all these active tissue mass that gets reduced. So BMR is 10 to 20% lower than the younger adult among the elderly. So as a result, these elderly, they are more prone to overweight and obesity and associated health hazards. And there is decrease in the number of taste buds on the tongue, and as a result the ability to taste salt, it is very much decreased among elderly, but this same sensation in case of sugar is not altered that much. Besides, there is a reduction in olfactory sensitivity also, which decreases the ability to detect the flavor of the food. So once the person cannot detect the flavor of food, it doesn't look that palatable. So this results in the poor intake of the food by the elderly. They don't enjoy or the relish that food which they were relishing when they were comparatively young. So this diminished taste and smell, it decreases the sensory stimulation also, and it will impair certain metabolic processes. Elderly may lose teeth or they have ill-fitting dentures, which will make the chewing process difficult. And as a result, they might omit fresh vegetables and fruits from their diet. And this may lead to vitamin or the mineral deficiencies. And this will result in decreased gastrointestinal motility. As we know, all these fruits and vegetables, they not only contain vitamins and minerals, but they are also good sources of fiber, which are helpful in maintaining the gut motility or the flexibility of the intestines. So this will lead in problem in elimination of the stools. So as they might experience constipation. And along with that, there could be decrease in the salivary secretion or the lack of salivation, the production of saliva. So this will cause a dryness of the mouth, and it makes the chewing process or the swallowing of the food difficult for them. You must have experienced the elderly in your family. They are having a problem when they are eating certain dry fruits or the dry vegetables, or which are very crisp things, because they have less saliva secretion inside their body. So therefore, crunchy food or the dry or the sticky foods, they are usually avoided by these people. And when we talk about the digestive system, the secretion of certain digestive enzymes and digestive juices, they also decline with the age. And this causes incomplete digestion, or the food, it remains longer in the stomach for the digestion process. And along with that, the secretion of hydrochloric acid, which is the acid secreted in the stomach, and the intrinsic factor and the pepsin enzyme, it decreases. And this HCl, intrinsic factor, and pepsin, it affects the absorption of certain nutrients such as calcium, and then protein, iron, B12. All these things, they are affected, and their digestion digestion process gets hampered as the person ages. So people above 60 years of age, the rate of emptying of the liquids from the gut that also increases. Once the liquid that leaves the gut very fast, so it will leave little time to digest the nutrients. So the absorption of nutrients that also gets affected. The pH of the proximal small bowel that increases, and therefore the bacterial overgrowth happens in the bowel. This will alter the gut microbiota. And in the small intestine, there is decreased secretion of enzyme lactase, which will be a risk factor for development of the osteoporosis. So there will be thinning of the gastrointestinal layer of the gut, and this will decrease the gastric motility. That means the flexibility of the gut that will be affected. And the prolonged transit through the colon, it will lead to constipation. There will also be decrease in the blood flow to the liver. This will lead to minor structural or the biochemical changes inside the liver. Now the gallbladder, it will become sluggish, and so the bile release that will be affected. The gallbladder is going to release the bile when the food enters the duodenum. So it will impair the fat metabolism because bile is needed for the digestion of fat inside our body, and it will increase the susceptibility of gallstones because the gallbladder is not working efficiently. It is not flushing out the bile. So the bile salts, they will stay inside the gallbladder. So therefore the person will be more prone to develop the gallstones. And along with that, the activity of drug metabolizing enzymes that also decrease. So that is why during old age, it is recommended that they should not go overboard when they are taking drugs. There will be changes in the blood vessels also. That means our arteries and veins, such as there will be narrowing of the lumen. Lumen is the inner area of the blood vessel from where the blood or the fluids they flow. And along with that, there will be thickening of the arterial walls. That means the walls of the arteries, they are getting thickened, and the elastic muscle fibers of these vessels, they are replaced by inelastic fibers. So what will happen as a result? These vessels, they will become rigid and they will lose their flexibility. So their capacity to carry nutrients to all the cells of the body, that will be reduced. And along with that, there will be decreased myocardial contractibility. That means the ability to contract and pump out the blood, that will be lowered. And along with that, there will be increased peripheral resistance. Peripheral resistance is the resistance which is given by the vessels which are there in our extremities, say in our hands, in our upper and lower limbs. So this will cause high blood pressure when the person ages. There will be decrease in the neuromuscular coordination also. The elderly, they may develop a state of confusion, and elderly, they may feel difficult while walking, while concentrating, or holding things such as plates or the glasses. They will be uncomfortable holding that because of this lack of neuromuscular coordination. And there could be this could be because of decreased synthesis of serotonin inside their body, and under such conditions, it is suggested that creatinine, which is derived from amino acid lysine and the methionine, it is effective against slowing down the mental deterioration. And along with creatinine, there are carotenoids, which are precursors of vitamin A. They are also considered good in this condition. And when we talk about kidneys, there is decrease in the glomerulofiltration rate, that is GFR, which will affect the elimination of the waste products and the reabsorption of the electrolytes by the kidneys. So the body's ability to regenerate the nephrons, which are the functioning units of the kidney, that also ceases after the 40 years of age. So therefore, whenever there is increase in the solute load, that means there is higher load on the kidneys, there will be more load on the each nephron which is left, because the new nephrons, they are not getting produced. So the already existing ones, they will be overwhelmed with the work, and this can lead to necrosis and the kidney damage. And along with that, the demineralization of bones, it is more rapid than the mineralization process. So this will result in bones becoming vulnerable to fractures, and the vertebra, it may collapse. And this results in decline in the height, and a stooped or the bowed posture can happen. This posture may affect the respiratory function, as it will decrease the lung capacity. You must have seen the elderly walking, they lose certain height. That is because they lose a certain strength from their backbone or the spine. That is why they lose on height. And there is decline in the pulmonary function also. The pulmonary capacity, it declines to about 40% throughout life. So among elderly, this may not have an impact on health directly, but it may impose a restriction on the energetic exercises by the elderly as the age progresses. The activity of many glands such as thyroid, adrenal cortex, they decrease, and this results in changing metabolism and other functions of the body. This hormonal imbalance, it also affects the calcium metabolism, and this leads to osteoporosis and the bone loss. And menopause in the woman, that also decreases the iron requirement of the females. That is why when we study about the recommendations, the males and females, they have similar iron requirements after the females, they achieve their menopause. Immunocompetence also declines with the age. That is why we consider elderly among vulnerable group. Even in the COVID waves, we have seen these elderly being affected the most. So the ophthalmic function also changes, which will cause the opacity of the eye lens. So their day-to-day activities, they are also affected. So their mobility and physical activity, that is also affected. And along with that, the requirement of antioxidants, that also increases. Now, let us talk about the physical and the psychological changes which occur during old age. Old age people, they develop certain physical changes which are due to the process of maturation, like we see graying of hair, then wrinkled skin, and there is decline in height and the bowed posture, and there will be loss of vision, and there is decrease in sense of hearing also, and their physical strength and the vigor, that also decreases with the age. And their dietary pattern, that also gets impacted because of their aging process, because the food preferences, they are based on the food habits which they have acquired over years of their life, and it has many factors which have their contribution, such as social factors, their economical factor, regional background, or certain individual choices. So that is why elderly, they have a fixed kind of lifestyle. Now, after the aging sets in, they find it difficult to adapt to the changes in the availability of certain food items, and see the new dishes or the new cuisines, they start entering the market, and they find difficult to adjust to this changing environment. and they stick to the pleasant past experience of certain foods, and they have firmly established beliefs about certain foods, such as which nutrient to take and which food is good for their health. So we have to be very careful while we are suggesting modifications in the food to an elderly person. And certain elderly, they have lack of nutrition knowledge also. And with the changing age, certain kind of modifications are needed. So with increasing urbanization and the generation gap setting in, nuclear family systems they have emerged. And the elderly, they are considered irrelevant and redundant by their own families, and they are left lonely when their children they settle away from them. And loneliness, this leads to depression, and in turn there is loss of appetite, and this they tend to follow irregular meal pattern, which leads to malnutrition. Among many elderly people, there are certain financial constraints also which limit their food intake, as they lose their constant income and they may feel insecure while spending on choice of foods. Certain emotional factors such as stress and deprivation that leads to alteration in the food habits and the attitudes towards the food. So along with that, there are certain hormonal changes also which are associated with the anxiety, and this depress the flow of digestive juices, which results in impaired digestion and absorption process. And with retirement, the elderly may experience a loss of self esteem, and with decrease in the physical strength, mobility, and diminishing financial resources, their dependence on the others it increases. They sometimes feel powerless, leaving the task of decision making to the younger ones, to their sons or the daughters. And this may also cause depression and frustration among the elderly. This affects their food habits. And loss of authority and the status which a person has enjoyed during the early years of his adulthood, and loneliness, it causes depression. This affects the adjustment to the living environment, that is a present environment, and it affects the food intake. Now this depression, it can affect in two ways. This may result in overeating, as the elderly might seek emotional comfort by eating more, and they will become overweight or obese. Or on the other side, they may reject food and they become undernourished. So depression can be a double-edged sword for elderly. Let's summarize what we have studied in this lecture. We have studied about the aging process, and we have studied that aging, it is not a disease, but it is a biological process. And aging, it is a irreversible biochemical change that occurs throughout an individual's life, and during the life cycle, it continues until the death of the person. And then we studied about the free radical theory of aging, in which we studied that what is the effect of antioxidants in preventing the aging, and what is the role of pro-oxidants and the free radical, which damage the cells and tissues and cause aging. Then we studied about the various changes. First of all, we studied about the physiological changes which are associated with the aging, in which we studied how the body functions, they are affected with the aging process. We studied about the changes in the body composition, then how the taste and smell sensation that gets altered, then alteration in the gastrointestinal tract, and the juices inside it, they change. And then we studied about the decline in the kidney function, in the heart function, and the blood vessels, then the decreased capacity of the lungs to function, the skeletal system, how it is affecting the height of the person, and the loss of skeletal mass occurs, and the diminishing immunity, changes in the eyes, where the eyes they become more prone to opacity, and it affects the day-to-day activities of the person, and there are altered hormones inside the body of the elderly as a result of aging. And then we studied about certain physical changes. We studied that older people, they have certain physical changes which we see on the basis of their maturation symptoms, such as graying of hair, wrinkled skin, and decline in height and bowed posture. And we also studied that they could be having certain loss of vision, or there will be decrease in the sense of hearing, and there will be decrease in the physical strength and the vigor. And lastly, we studied about the psychological changes, in which we studied about the function of anxiety, depression, loneliness, loss of self-esteem, self-confidence among elderly. Now, this finishes our today's lecture. We shall be continuing the nutrition care of the elderly in the coming lectures. Thank you very much. So we will continue the nutrient needs of water and antioxidants in the next lecture, and we will also study about the dietary recommendations and modifications needed for the elderlies. So this finishes today's lecture. Thank you very much.